Sir, thank you. We're going to shift to Adam Schiff now, who's speaking.
Crossed a deeply regrettable line in this committee where, for the first time in the 10 years or so that I've been on the committee, there was a vote to politicize the declassification process of intelligence and potentially compromise sources and methods. I made a couple motions this afternoon or this evening. First, we scheduled the hearing today, or the business meeting, so that the minority memoranda could be made available to the members of the House that had been misled by the majority's memoranda. We expected that vote to be non-controversial, and it was. The House members will now have access to the minority memoranda. I made a secondary motion that prior to the public release of either memoranda, that the FBI and the Department of Justice have the opportunity to come and brief the entire House in a classified session on both memoranda, on the underlying facts and the underlying materials, so that the committee could make a responsible judgment as to whether the memoranda should be made public. That motion was voted down by the majority. The majority expressed a concern that something in the minority memoranda or otherwise could compromise sources and methods, and for exactly that reason we asked that both memoranda be vetted by the FBI and the Department of Justice, but that was voted down. I spoke with the director of the FBI earlier this afternoon. He expressed his strong interest in being able to brief our committee prior to any release of these materials about concerns that the Bureau and the Department have. I relayed that interest by the director of the FBI, a appointee of President Trump, to this committee, but that was unavailing. They were not willing to meet with the director of the FBI to hear the Bureau's concerns or the Department's concerns. Instead, they voted against allowing their own members, as well as the members of the broader House of Representatives, to be briefed by the Department of Justice and FBI on these memoranda. Finally, I moved that if the majority was going to release their memoranda publicly, that they release the minority views as well, that they be released jointly. And the majority, on a party line basis, voted against both memoranda being released to the public. They then took up their own memoranda and voted it out to make public. We had a separate vote on the minority memoranda, and the majority voted against allowing the public to see the minority memoranda. The release the memo crowd apparently doesn't want to release the memo now. The most they would do is say that at some indeterminate point, a week or so from now, they would consider whether to release the minority memo. We raised, of course, the transparently political objective behind this, which is to allow the majority to set a certain narrative for a week or so before they released a full statement of the facts from the minority. But nonetheless, this is where we are. We had votes today to politicize the intelligence process, to prohibit the FBI and the Department of Justice from expressing their concerns to our committee and to the House, and to selectively release to the public only the majority's distorted memo without the full facts. A very sad day, I think, in the history of this committee. As I said to my committee colleagues during this hearing, sadly, we can fully expect that the President of the United States will not put the national interest over his own personal interest. But it is a sad day indeed when that is also true of our own committee, because today this committee voted to put the President's personal interest, perhaps their own political interest, above the national interest, in denying themselves even the ability to hear from the Department and the FBI. And that is, I think, a deeply regrettable state of affairs. But it does show how, in my view, when you have a deeply flawed person in the Oval Office, that flaw can infect the whole of government, and today, tragically, it infected our committee. And at this point, I'll yield to my colleagues.
Well, we're now